Have you ever stopped to think about how many things you believe about space that simply aren't true? Well, the universe is full of mysteries, but it's also full of myths that we repeat without ever questioning. And today, I'm going to show you some of the biggest misconceptions about the cosmos that will make you rethink everything you've ever heard. Just imagine, since childhood we grow up hearing that in space there is no sound, that astronauts float because there is no gravity, or even that the sun is a ball of fire. But what if I told you that none of this is exactly like that? It almost sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. But science loves to break certainties. The most curious thing is that many of these myths were born from the way the media, movies, and even some teachers tried to simplify difficult concepts. But in the process, they created completely distorted images. After all, who has never seen a scene of an astronaut spinning aimlessly in infinite space, as if he were in a place with no force acting at all? But the truth is much more fascinating than the myth. And every time we understand a detail of the universe, the feeling is like discovering a new piece of a gigantic puzzle. And since you've made it this far, get ready. The first myth we're going to break is one that almost everyone believes. The first myth is a classic. In space, there is no sound. It seems obvious, right? After all, everyone has heard that space is a vacuum, and that without air, sound waves cannot propagate. But hold on, this is not totally true. It's a fact that in a complete vacuum sound doesn't travel. But the universe is not a perfect vacuum. It is full of gases, cosmic dust, and even plasma in specific regions. And guess what? These elements can indeed transmit vibrations. So, in some places in space, sound exists, just not in the way you're used to. In 2003, for example, NASA recorded sound waves coming from a cluster of galaxies called Perseus. They were pressure waves crossing the hot gas that surrounds the cluster with an absurdly low pitch, something like 57 octaves below middle C on a piano. In other words, impossible for the human ear, but still, sound. Now, imagine yourself inside a spaceship without protection, expecting to hear a space thunder echoing among the stars. No, that's not going to happen. What exists are vibrations in environments full of particles, and they can only be picked up with specific instruments. So, the next time someone says that space is totally silent, you already know it's not quite like that. And the most impressive thing is that this is just the beginning, because the next myth involves nothing less than the force that keeps our feet stuck to the ground. Many people believe that astronauts float because there is no gravity in space. But, surprise, this is completely wrong. Gravity is everywhere in the universe, from your room to the most distant galaxies. In fact, it is precisely what keeps the moon revolving around the Earth, the planets around the sun, and even the stars bound in their galaxies. So why do astronauts seem to be weightless? What happens is something called microgravity. They are still under the influence of Earth's gravity, and it's not a small thing. The International Space Station orbits at only 400 kilometers of altitude, where gravity is almost as strong as down here. The difference is that they are in continuous free fall. Imagine you jumping from an airplane. During the fall, the sensation is that of floating, because you and everything around you are falling at the same speed. In Earth's orbit, it's the same logic, only without the ground to interrupt the fall. Result: that magical dance of astronauts floating. It's as if they were eternally falling around the planet. It almost looks like a magic trick, but it's pure physics. And the most fascinating thing is that, without this microgravity, many scientific experiments that revolutionized medicine and technology would never have been possible. Now, if you think gravity is surprising, just wait until you hear the next myth. It involves none other than the most important star for our life, the sun. How many times have you heard that the sun is a ball of fire? This image is so common that it seems impossible to be wrong, but it is. The sun is not a giant bonfire burning in space. If it were, it would have gone out a long time ago. In fact, what keeps the sun shining is something much more powerful: nuclear fusion. Inside the solar core, the pressure and temperature are so absurd that hydrogen atoms come together to form helium, releasing a colossal amount of energy. It's like millions of hydrogen bombs exploding every second, only in a controlled and continuous way. This energy slowly travels from the center to the surface in a process that can take thousands of years, and only then is released as light and heat. When it finally reaches us, 8 minutes after leaving the sun, it looks like we're seeing fire. But in essence, it's not combustion but pure nuclear physics. Now think with me. If the sun were really fire, it would need oxygen to burn. And since there is no oxygen in space, that idea already falls apart. It's almost poetic. The star that gives us life is not in flames like a torch, but rather converting matter into energy. And here comes the most incredible part. The sun still has fuel to shine for billions of years. But when this cycle ends, then we will have a spectacle of cosmic proportions. And speaking of spectacles, the next myth is one of those that challenge our very own vision. The idea that we see the stars exactly as they are now. You must have heard someone say, "When we look at the sky, we see the stars as they are now." Beautiful, right? But it's not true. What we actually see in the sky is, in fact, the past of the universe. Light doesn't travel instantly. It has an incredible speed, 300,000 kilometers per second. But even so, it takes time to cross the absurd distances of space. This means that when you look at a star, you're seeing it as it was years, centuries, or even millennia ago. Take, for example, the light from the sun. It takes about 8 minutes to reach Earth. In other words, if the sun disappeared now, calm down, that won't happen. We would only notice it 8 minutes later. The star Sirius, the brightest in the night sky, is 8 light years away. This means that when you see it, you are looking at something that happened in 2017. And there's more. Some stars we observe may even have already exploded and disappeared, but their light keeps traveling through space, reaching us like a cosmic ghost. It's like watching a recorded show, believing that it is still happening live. Impressive, isn't it? The starry sky you admire may actually be an ancient portrait, frozen in time. And if you think that's surprising, wait until you hear the next myth, the idea that the hidden side of the moon is eternally dark. They say around that the moon has a side eternally dark, the one that never receives sunlight. It almost seems like a mysterious secret, almost scary. But calm down, that's a myth. The moon doesn't have a dark side. It has a hidden side. What happens is that the moon takes the same time to rotate around itself and to orbit the Earth. This makes it always show the same face to us. The other side, which we call hidden, faces away from our planet, but it also receives sunlight, exactly like the face we see from here. That is, there is no side permanently plunged into darkness. During the lunar cycle, all parts of the moon receive light at some point. What changes is who is looking. We can never see this other side with the naked eye. And here goes the extra curiosity. Only in 1959 did humanity see for the first time images of the far side of the moon, thanks to the Soviet probe Luna 3. It was a shock to realize that that region had far fewer smooth plains, the so-called Maria, and many more craters, giving it a very different appearance from the face we know. So the next time someone talks about the dark side of the moon, now you know, it may even be mysterious, but dark it is not. And since we are talking about celestial mysteries, let's move on to a myth that seems like something out of a Hollywood movie. That in space, astronauts can explode without a special suit. Thanks to movies and cartoons, many people believe that if an astronaut takes off the suit in space, he will explode. It seems like a dramatic scene, but it's just fiction. The reality is very different, and even more curious. In the vacuum of space, there is no atmospheric pressure. This causes the gases inside the human body to expand, but calm down. The body is not going to explode like a bursting balloon. What would really happen is that the person would lose consciousness in a few seconds due to lack of oxygen. Another effect is that saliva and tears would start to boil, not because they are hot, but because without pressure, the boiling point of water drops drastically. Imagine the strange sensation of seeing your saliva bubbling. But even so, the skin and body tissues are strong enough to prevent everything from bursting. The most incredible thing. Under ideal conditions, a person could survive for about a minute in space without a suit, as long as they were rescued quickly. There are even records of accidents in vacuum chambers here on Earth that prove this. Some workers lost consciousness, but were saved and recovered. So, no cinematic explosions. The truth is less visually spectacular, but much scarier in practice. And since we are talking about danger and survival, how about we now dismantle another famous myth? The one that says that black holes work like cosmic vacuum cleaners, sucking everything around. When someone mentions black holes, the image that comes to mind is that of a space monster devouring everything around, like a giant vacuum cleaner sucking up planets, stars, and even spaceships. But is that really the case? Not exactly. Black holes are regions of space where gravity is so intense that nothing can escape, not even light. But this force does not spread magically throughout the universe. In practice, they obey the same laws of gravity as any other massive object. Imagine, for example, if the sun were replaced by a black hole of the same mass. Do you know what would happen to Earth's orbit? Absolutely nothing. We would continue orbiting around it, only in the dark and without heat, of course. That is, there is no such irresistible pull at great distances. What makes black holes frightening is what happens when you get very close, inside the region called the event horizon. There, yes, there is no return. Gravity overcomes any attempt to escape. It is like crossing a door that only opens inward. The vacuum cleaner myth was born because, yes, if an object gets too close, it will be swallowed with no chance of return. But this only happens on local scales. From afar, a black hole is just another massive body in the universe. And the most intriguing thing is that black holes not only destroy, they also influence the formation of entire galaxies, acting as cosmic architects. Now, if you think this is surprising, hold on for the next myth. The idea that humans use only 10% of the brain. This is one of those myths that spread so much, it even became a movie script. The idea that we humans use only 10% of the brain. Then comes the inevitable question, and the other 90%, are they just for decoration? Of course not. The truth is that we use practically all areas of the brain, just not all at the same time. What happens is that different regions are activated depending on the activity. Reading a book, playing guitar, running, solving a math problem. Each of these actions involves different circuits. If it were true that we only use a small fraction, an injury in any part of the brain would make no difference. But we know that even small damages can cause huge losses in memory, speech, or coordination. This proves that all areas have essential functions. This myth began in the early 20th century, when scientists were still mapping brain functions. Some said they did not know the function of 90% of the brain, and the phrase ended up distorted into, "We do not use 90%. It is funny to imagine that we would have a hidden superpower waiting to be unlocked, but the reality is even more amazing. Even using everything, our brain is capable of feats that seem impossible, like creating symphonies, exploring space, or imagining infinity itself. And since we are talking about human limits and discoveries, the last myth on our list involves nothing less than the greatest enigma of the universe, the idea that it is infinite and has always existed. One of the biggest myths about the cosmos is the idea that the universe is infinite and has always existed. It seems logical. After all, when we look at the sky, we see an endless immensity. But science shows us something quite different, and much more impressive. The universe is not eternal. It had a beginning, the famous Big Bang, which happened about 13.8 billion years ago. That was the moment when everything we know, space, time, matter, and energy, came into being. Before that, there simply was no before, because time itself was born together with the universe. Hard to imagine, isn't it? And about being infinite, the answer is, we don't know for sure. What scientists can measure is the observable universe, limited by the distance that light has managed to travel since the Big Bang. That is already gigantic, about 93 billion light-years in diameter. It is so immense that trying to imagine it makes your head spin. But infinite? That is still an open mystery. So, every time we look at the starry sky, we are not just contemplating the beauty of space. We are looking at the history of the universe, at the echo of its very origin. It's like leafing through an album of cosmic photographs page by page. So, which of these myths surprised you the most? Tell me here in the comments, because I really want to know. And of course, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next curiosities that will change the way you see the world and the universe.